So good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's workshop on Power BI fundamentals with WeCloudData. I'd like to first thank everyone for taking the time out of your day to join us, and I look forward to having a productive session with everyone. Now, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put it forward in the chat box, and we can always discuss it from there. All right, so as I keep admitting more people and as they keep joining, I will continue. Okay, so before we get started, I'd like to just briefly mention today's agenda, and followed by that, I will be introducing myself and the company as well before we move on with the project at hand. All right, so the first thing that we're going to take a look at today is what is Power BI. We'll be learning what the overview of Power BI is and what it can help you do, what it helps businesses do. We will also be taking a look at what are some of the advantages of Power BI, how Power BI compares to the other tools in the market, and why it is becoming one of the most popular tools out there in terms of visualization and data analytics. We will also take a look at the project overview. So since this is a hands-on workshop, we will be working on a project, and I hope that everyone is also working along with me today. So we will be discussing more about that. We will also be talking about the project outcomes, so what we can expect once the project today is done. And finally, we'll end it off with some details about the business intelligence bootcamp at WeCloudData. And finally, we'll be having the Q&A session. Okay, so a bit about myself first. So my name is Adnan, and I'm the program manager for the Applied Business Intelligence certificate at WeCloudData. Now, before joining WeCloudData, I've previously worked at different industries in different parts of the world. I graduated as a software engineer, and after that, I worked at Maybank in Malaysia. It's basically one of the largest financial institutions in Southeast Asia. And after working there for a short period, I moved back to Saudi Arabia, which is my birthplace. And I worked there as a business analyst for an electrical solutions company. So I worked there about 2 years before moving to Canada. And after I moved here, I worked as a remote software engineer for an IT consultation company based in San Francisco, where we mainly worked on client projects for analytics and websites. And after that, I've joined WeCloudData. So that's a bit about myself. Now, to introduce the company of WeCloudData, just seeing if it's loading properly. So WeCloudData is a leading data and AI training company in Canada. And we are also an accredited college known as Toronto Institute of Data Science and Technology. We have also been recognized by both private and public institutions as a top choice for corporate training for employees, as well as a valuable pool of graduates to recruit from. Now, we currently offer boot camps and diploma programs in different concentrations of the data career pathway, such as business intelligence, data science, data engineering, artificial intelligence, and machine learning and DevOps. So here are some examples of our industry partners and clients we've worked with in the past, either from corporate training or under our consultancy program. So feel free to go through our website for some of the highlighted success stories of students who arrived to us with diverse backgrounds and are currently fully fledged data experts who will be shaping the digital landscape in the future. So for that, all you'll have to do is go to WeCloudData.com and you'll be able to see all the information over there. Now, in addition to that, our alumni, or the students who graduated from us, they've gone on to work with many different industries out there. And as you may know, data is basically one of the most, how should I put it? So in terms of the digital transformation that has been happening over the years, right? Data has definitely become one of the most pervasive fields or the pervasive domains out there. So in terms of adoption of any other aspect of business, data definitely has proven itself to be one of the most beneficial aspects to any company out there. So that being said, it basically means that every company out there, regardless of which industry they operate in, they are using data to a certain extent. And since our students basically come from different backgrounds, they're able to leverage their previous experience, or even with no experience, they're able to leverage whatever they've learned during the program and basically go into any of their preferential industries out there. So our alumni network extends to many different types of industries, as you can see over here, and we've only highlighted some of the more prominent ones. no matter which industry you'd like to penetrate, you will always find support with us amongst our faculty members, operations team, alumni, and mainly our mentor network. So let's get started. All right, so today's topic at hand is all about Power BI. Now, if you have been looking into the data analytics field, or if you've been following the data analytics field, then you may have already heard of Power BI. Even if you have not, that's not a worry. We'll talk more about it in details right now. So Power BI is from Microsoft, okay? So Microsoft basically came up with their own solution for BI solutions, which is business intelligence solution, and that answer is Power BI. Now, to define it simply, Power BI is an interactive data visualization software, okay? And it is a part of Microsoft Power Platform. So as with any other data visualization software, what it helps you do is basically connect to large data sets or data sources out there. It can either be internal data sources stored on databases that is handled by the company, or you can always connect it to external data sources and manipulate data from external sources. Now, by connecting to external data sources and internal data sources, you're able to collect information from both of these aspects, and you're able to bring it together and visualize it in an insightful and intuitive way so that business users who are going to be dealing with these kind of information, it's easier for them to digest this information, okay? Now, Power BI by itself, it's free to use. There are subscription models which Power BI runs off of, and those subscription models are only limited for organizations. So let's say that you are working in an organization and whatever work you are doing on Power BI, you'd like to share it with a specific team or with a specific department, then you would have to go with the subscription model. If you are working on it by yourself and you are just basically working on your own project by yourself, then you don't have to pay a single dime. One of the biggest advantages of Power BI is that, well, again, this point might be a bit biased, but Microsoft's always had a good history of being very supportive of their products. So the kind of functionalities that you can enjoy with these products are extensive, right? And to that end, Power BI is no different. Power BI allows you to connect to more than 70 different data sources. And the number actually keeps growing day by day. With every new update, there's some new additional features to Power BI. And since it's a relatively new software as well, or new product from Microsoft, you can expect many years of support down the line from Microsoft. So the functionality and the kinds of things that you can do with it will just keep on growing out there. All right. Now, in addition to all the other data sources out there, the most commonly used ones would be Excel, CSV. You can also connect directly to SQL servers or even the web servers out there. Okay. In addition to being able to connect to multiple types of data sources, you can also export it in multiple formats. So whenever you have created a report or a dashboard on Power BI, and let's say that you'd like to share a snapshot of whatever you are trying to display, you can always export it as a PowerPoint, Excel, or CSV, or HTML, or different formats out there. Now, one of the biggest advantages of Power BI would definitely be its capability to handle ETL, which is the extract, transform, load, or as you may know it as the data cleaning step, as well as visualization in one package. Now, when you compare it to let's say Tableau, right? Tableau is definitely a great software. It's been around for quite a while. And it definitely has the market share as well, just because it's one of those softwares that has it's one of those BI softwares that's popped up in the market way long ago. So it did, like in all those large companies and banks, retailers, they definitely adopted Tableau at an early stage. But Power BI, even though it is a relatively new entrant to the market, it definitely made its way in the stage, just because you're able to do both data cleaning as well as visualization in one package. Tableau, they've recently released something called Tableau Data Prep, which allows you to do the data cleaning processes there. But the Tableau software by itself, or the Tableau desktop, it does not allow you to do too much or too many data cleaning processes. And the other advantage of Power BI would be that because it's, again, from a large company like Microsoft, they're able to afford the support for new users. Okay. And to that extent, what I mean by that is that the documentation available online just from Microsoft itself is very extensive. So no matter what you're trying to do, it's most likely there in the documentation. So for a beginner, if you're just learning how to pick up Power BI, the documentation of Microsoft is very extensive and will definitely give you a boost in your learning process. Even if what you're trying to look for or what you're trying to do in Power BI is not available on the documentation, the community at this point has grown to a large number, to the point that if you go to their community site, so it's community.powerbi.com, if I'm not wrong, you can always post a question there, regardless of how simple your question could be or how complicated your question could be. The community is very supportive. So no matter what kind of question you have, feel free to post it up there, and someone will definitely reach out to you, either from the Microsoft team itself or someone from the community who's willing to help. The other advantage that Power BI has recently been enjoying is its custom visualization support. So recently, again, at this point, I don't think it's so recent, it's probably been a few months now. What they've included is Python support. So when it comes to other visualization softwares, like, for example, QlikView or Looker, I'm not sure if Looker has that yet, but as far as I understand, most of the other visualization softwares limit you to using the visualizations that provider itself provides. So for example, if you were to use Tableau, you would be limited to the visualizations that only Tableau offers, okay? Even though Tableau is probably one of the most aesthetically pleasing visualization softwares out there. Again, design is entirely dependent on perspective. So for some people, Tableau is better. For some people, Looker is better. For some people, Power BI is better. That's entirely subjective. But in terms of options that you have when it comes to visualizations, Power BI allows you to do custom visualization, which means that you can integrate Python inside it. And Python being an open source software, you can possibly, the only limit probably would be your imagination plus what Python is capable of. So that's something that you could enjoy with Power BI. So even if Power BI by itself does not have the built-in visualizations, you can always integrate external visualizations that might be more suitable for your needs. So for example, you're trying to do some sort of scientific, let's say you're trying to do fluid thermodynamics simulation visualization, right? Now, this is not something that is common for businesses, right? So probably you are some sort of researcher, or you're probably some sort of materials engineer who's trying to do those visualizations. Then you would only need that. As a normal business user, you probably would not need that. So Power BI by itself, it does not offer that visualization, but you can always go to the marketplace, download whatever kind of visualization support you need, and start utilizing that. Okay, so moving forward, the project we're going to be getting our hands dirty with Power BI today is the AdventureWorks database. Okay, now some of you might already be familiar with AdventureWorks. For those who are not familiar with AdventureWorks, it is basically the sample database that is shipped out with SQL Server. Okay, so Microsoft, when they ship out their SQL Server product, they provide a sample database so that beginners can get used to it and they can start working with it. Okay, and AdventureWorks, what it is that it's an example of an online transaction processing database. So what that means is that as a business processes a transaction, right? So for example, let's say you go into Walmart and you purchase a product, right? That purchase is immediately logged in Walmart servers, all right? Which basically means that every transaction that's being carried out through their POS or endpoint systems, it's being recorded in their servers. And that allows Walmart to understand that, okay, in a day, how much sales have we made? In a quarter, how much revenue have we generated? Are we in profit or loss? All those different things, okay? So the AdventureWorks database kind of replicates that OLTP or online transaction processing database. Now, the background or the context of AdventureWorks itself is that AdventureWorks is a fictional multinational manufacturing company that produces bicycles, accessories, and related products. Okay, so anything to do with bicycles or cycling, AdventureWorks does that. Okay, in terms of gear, like for example, seats, bottle holders, lamps, headset, helmets, and all those different things, in addition to the typical things that cycles companies sell, which are also bikes, road bikes, mountain bikes, and all that. Okay. Now there are different versions available of AdventureWorks online. The one that we'll be using is 2016 version. So what we've done is we've basically gone into the AdventureWorks database. We've extracted certain tables that is easy to work with because the database itself by itself is very extensive. So if we start off with that, it'd be very confusing. We'll keep it simple and something that we can easily comprehend by just taking a look at it. All right. At this point, before I move on with the analytics process itself, I would like to share the link of the download of Microsoft Power BI with you so that you can start downloading and installing it while I explain the analytics process. So what I've done is I've put up the link to the download for Power BI in the chat. So what I'd like everyone to do, or at least those who are following along for today's workshop, is to go ahead and download it and install it in your computer. Now, keep in mind that Power BI is you can only run Power BI on Microsoft Windows, okay? If you have a Mac, unfortunately, you cannot run it on Mac OS. You will need some form of Windows OS, okay? Now, if you have an Intel-based chip, you could always install Windows, a separate copy of Windows on your computer using the bootcamp assistant. If you have the latest versions of Mac, which is basically M1 or M2 chip-based laptops, the only option you would have is using something called Parallels, which will basically allow you to emulate Windows in your computer. But other than that, you cannot use Power BI on M1 or M2 chips, okay? All right, so as everyone downloads this, let me go ahead and explain the analytics process to you, okay? Now, the analytics process itself, it is a very generalized term, okay? Each business use case that's being analyzed out there, right, in terms of data analysis, it has its own context. So for example, the way that you would deal with retail data, it would not be exactly the same as the way that you deal with customer data, okay? Or maybe even web analytics data, or maybe even healthcare data. So since you're trying to arrive at a different answer to every, in different industries, the context changes, so does the process change a bit, okay? But technically what you could do is generalize the whole framework and generalize the whole process into a framework that is easy to understand so that you have a general idea of how to approach it, but the subtle nuances that are involved in each project changes with context of the project itself that you're working with, okay? So January, you will have access to today's recording. What we'll do is it usually takes a bit of time for us to edit the video and upload it to YouTube. So when it is available, you will find it on YouTube on our WeCloudData channel, okay? So all you have to do is just go to YouTube, type in WeCloudData, you'll find our channel there. And once the video is available, you can always take a look at that. There are other videos available already, which are basically related to data engineering, data science. So if you're interested in learning more about the data field, feel free to go through the WeCloudData channel and taking a look at those videos before this video is uploaded, okay? All right, so the analytics process itself. Now, as I was saying, the whole analytics process can be generalized to certain steps, okay? With every analytics process, the first step that you'll have to understand or you have to figure out is why you are performing this analysis in the first place, right? And that is defined as the requirements analysis. Now, this step defines what or how the next steps will proceed, okay? Depending on what you need or what you define in this requirement analysis step, it will define how the next steps should proceed, okay? So once you have defined how what your end goal is, you'll get a clear idea or you'll get an understanding of where to look at in the first place, okay? So let's say that in this case, we are working with fictional bicycle company, right? Which is basically a retailer. So typically retailer companies, sorry, let me pause there. You don't have to pay for downloading, it is free. Microsoft Power BI, you can download it for free. So let me just show you how to do that before I move on. Okay, so once you go to the link that I've sent you, all you'll have to do is click on download. Once you run and install it, you will get a pop-up that asks you to sign in. You don't have to bother with that. You don't have to even sign in. You can just close the first dialog box, and you should have something like this if you open up. If you can move Power BI, it's stuck. Okay. Yeah, so you'll basically get a view like this. Even if it asks you to sign in, you don't have to sign in, so you can just leave it as it is, okay? All right, so getting back to the requirement analysis. So once you have defined why or what you're trying to figure out with your analysis, then comes the next step of data sourcing, okay? So in this case, what we're going to be working with is a retailer, typical retailer data, right? So Adventure Works sells bicycles, it's a retailer, you have different product inside it. And let's say that we know what kind of end goal we're trying to achieve, okay? So just to give you a gist of what we're going to be achieving today, we're going to be trying to find out how much the sales and budget has been for one fiscal year, and what are some of the top 5 products out there that are being sold by AdventureWorks, what are the top 5 categories, and what are the top 5 subcategories, in addition to other questions out there, okay? Now, once I have defined these questions, right, I will know where to look at, okay? Which basically leads us to the data sourcing stage. Now, within a large company, you can have data of many different kinds, right? So, for example, you have a website, you could have web analytics data, okay? Like, for example, how many times people are visiting your web page, or what kind of people are visiting your web page, what demographic they're from, which location they're from, what peak times are they visiting, or what pages they're looking at. These are all examples of web analytics data, and that is just one segment of one department of the company. And then the finance department would have their own data, or their product team would have their own data, their manufacturing team has their own data, right? With all this data siloed in the same place, without a clear context of what you're going to be looking at, it's hard to, like, it's basically trying to look for a needle in a haystack. So once you've clearly defined what your requirement is, you will know what to look at or where to gather the data from, okay? Now, once you have gathered the required data, or you have an understanding of what the data is going to be that you're going to be using, next comes the extract, transform, load process, which is the ETL step. Now, the ETL step is all about data cleaning, okay? Unfortunately, even to this day, even with analytics and AI and data science being at such an advanced stage, the data storage policies or the data governance of many companies have not caught up to these standards yet, right? So, for example, if someone is storing data, or if some company is storing data using a legacy system that has not taken into consideration of proper or recommended data practices, then the data that is being stored in their databases will be very messy, right? It'll either be messy, or it'll be missing a few values here and there because of system error or system design flaw, or maybe even the shape of the data that is being stored is not appropriate for visualization, right? So maybe it's in a wide format instead of a long format. So all these different aspects make analytics much more difficult if you're trying to use the data in its raw stage. So data cleaning is one of the most important steps in the analytics process. And what you do within this ETL step will probably take up like 60% of your whole analytics stage, okay? Just because the data in itself is not always very clear, okay? May I know the name of the YouTube channel this will be in? All you'll have to do is just search up WeCloudData on YouTube, and you'll be able to find it there. Thank you very much, Christina. Okay. Sorry, I'm just getting messages. Okay, Sadhana, we will keep that in mind, and we'll definitely be emailing the link to you before the event itself starts, okay? All right. So once you have figured out, like, how to clean your data, right? Like, how to prepare the data in a suitable manner that fits the visualization purpose or the analytics purpose that you're going to be working with, comes the visualization aspect. Now, the visualization aspect, that you'll be doing during the visualization aspect is creating charts, visuals, graphs, and basically any visual format that will help you understand the data easily. When you have data in our tables, okay, basically some rows and columns, right? Rows and columns are great for storing a huge amount of data, but it's not easy to understand data when it's in that format. So it's always a good idea to be able to aggregate data. Okay, so let's say that you have a month's worth of transactions in your database. Now, would you be looking at each and every transaction to understand how your month performance has been, or would you like to take a look at the aggregation itself? And if you're able to aggregate it, since humans are very, like, for those of us who are blessed with eyesight, we are visual creatures, right? We tend to perceive our environment or our world by what we look at. So to that extent, we're very used to shapes and sizes, okay? When you take a look at two bar charts right beside each other, okay, in contrast to two numbers right beside each other, it's easier for you to tell which bar has a higher value compared to two numbers beside each other. So to that extent, visualization is very important, and visualization is very insightful for you to be able to convey a huge amount of data in a very short period of time, and also keep things interesting because you're able to add in graphics, colors, whatever your creativity inspires you to do. Once you have done, or once you are done with your visualizations process, you'll be moving on to the analysis and interpretation stage. Once you are, all your charts are up, you can easily see all the data aggregations up there. You'll be able to start seeing trends in the data, okay? So for example, you're plotting sales by month, okay? If you had it in a numerical format, you probably would not be able to understand the trend easily, just because all the numbers, they look pretty much the same. It's just a bunch of numbers. You can't really say if it's increasing or not unless you stare at it for quite a long time and do some mental mathematics, okay? But let's say we have a line chart. If a line chart goes up, the sales are going up. If a line chart goes down, the sales are going down. Or if a line chart has a bump in the middle, that something's up during that bump, right? So during the after the visualization stage, you'll be using all these charts to analyze and interpret the data. Now, once you're done with that, why does the analysis and interpretation stage flow back into the requirements analysis? Once you're at this analysis and interpretation stage, at this point, you are basically more aware of the data, okay? In the beginning, when you started off with this iteration, you might not have been aware of what kind of data you're working with, right? But as you go through the cycle once, you are now able to understand what kind of data you're working with even better, and you're able to have more context in it. And as you analyze this first iteration and interpret it based on what visualizations you found out, you're able to build more business questions in your mind. Okay, so let's say that now that you know that your sales has a bump in somewhere in the middle of the somewhere in the middle of the year, right? You're able to ask more deeper questions that, okay, why is there a bump there, or what caused this bump to occur? So that flows you back to the requirement analysis stage. That, okay, now I have a new business question to solve. What do I need to solve for this business question? And so on. So does the cycle go on? Okay. So every analytics process in large companies, at least, is not actually in large companies, I shouldn't say that. It's pretty much every analytics process. The more you dig, the deeper you can start looking into it. Okay. And it basically becomes kind of like a rabbit hole. Okay. The deeper you dig, the more you want to unearth about this data. And that's why it's always based on iterations, that during the first cycle, you were trying to find out what is, what's the overview of the data. Second cycle, you're basing your questions off of what have you found in the first cycle. Third cycle based on second cycle, and so forth. Okay. Now, this just generalizes the whole analytics process, but as I said before, it is not always the case that this exact process will be followed, right? So for example, sometimes you might jump back from data sourcing back to the requirement analysis stage once you find out that the data that you need is probably not available, or probably not the right kind of data that you should be asking, right? So probably your initial question itself was wrong. So you probably have to jump back. And there's always fine tuning there during the whole process. But once you understand this framework, it will give you an understanding of what you're trying to do in the end. Okay. All right. There isn't a Mac OS version for Power BI because, again, as I said, Power BI will only work on Windows. So for those who are working with Macs, if the first thing I would like you to check is whether your Mac or your MacBook is Intel chip or M1 or M2 chip. If you have an Intel chip, which is basically i5, i7, i3, then you're lucky because if you have enough storage space, you can download a Windows 10 copy from Microsoft's website. So it's basically Windows 10 ISO from the Microsoft website. Use Bootcamp Assistant to install Windows onto your Mac. And how you do that, you can always take a look at YouTube tutorials for that. There are plenty of tutorials there, and you could do that, okay? And for those with M1 chips, M1 chip, unfortunately, the only option you have is either using virtual desktops. And virtual desktop, the setup is kind of difficult. So the other option you would have is Parallels. So it's emulation software that allows you to run Windows on your Mac, and you'll be able to run Power BI from there. Not a problem at all. Power BI Online, it would not have all the capabilities of Power BI Desktop, just because you can use Power BI Online, if I'm not wrong, just to slice and dice through reports. But if you want to create reports, then you would probably only be limited to Power BI Desktop. But I'm not sure if they've updated Power BI Online, so I'm gonna double check that later. Okay, so project outcomes for today are what we're going to be achieving over the next hour. So the first thing we're going to do is understand the AdventureWorks data itself. Okay, data comprehension is definitely one of the first steps you should do in any analytics project. Otherwise, you're just going to be trying to connect to a data source that doesn't even relate to the question that you're trying to answer. After you've performed your exploration or manual data comprehension, you'll be performing the ETL, which is basically the extract, transform, and load. You'll be connecting to the data sources using Power BI and cleaning it up to basically make it fit the analysis requirements. After you've performed these cleaning steps, you'll be building the data model or building the table of relationships. So since data is always stored in multiple tables, not in one singular table, you would need to build a sort of model that allows these data softwares to understand how is each table related to the other table. Without that context, these softwares by itself, they will not be able to understand that, okay, how does the employee table relate to the salary table, or on which field does the employee table relate to the salary table? And as I've mentioned before, some of the requirements that we're going to be visualizing today are what are the top 5 products, what are the top 5 categories, and what are the top 5 subcategories. All right, so at this point, I hope everyone has finished downloading and installing Microsoft Power BI. So for the next step, what I'd like everyone to do is I'm going to be sending a link, a Drive link in the chat. And what I'd like everyone to do is just open up that Drive link and download the 2 data sets that you see in front of you. So you should have budget.xlsx and AdventureWorks database. So once you're done downloading that, what we'll do is we'll wait for 2 minutes and resume at my time at 7:40, is 7:38 right now. We'll resume at 7:40. So please go ahead and download these and finish installing Microsoft Power BI. So we have a question here. Is it possible for you to facilitate presentation slides so we can revise it in the future? Once the video has been uploaded, you will be able to review the whole session there. Unfortunately, we cannot be sharing the presentation slides, so you would have to resort to only using the video. Okay. So while we wait, what are your thoughts on future of tools like Power BI compared to new AI tools, LLMs, etc.? Sorry, what do you mean by LLMs again? Are you referring to language models? Okay. So, That is actually a good question. So linguistic models are basically, how should I say this? So Power BI by itself is a different domain from something like ChatGPT or Bard or whatever, right? Linguistic models are very good at this point just because they have a lot of training data that has allowed for these kind of tools to develop, right? For example, ChatGPT, there was a version 2 and there's version 3 now, which is the one that everyone's from, version 3.5 now, if I'm not wrong, that everyone's familiar with. And it's basically been trained on 175 billion different parameters, right? So if you're able to, or if whoever's like training these models, they're able to collect all that data and structure in a way that allows models or artificial intelligence to learn from it, then it's definitely possible, right? But what Power BI does is that it builds charts and visuals, right? Which basically needs some sort of human input into seeing that, okay, what is more relevant to the business itself. Of course, AI is catching up. There are, even in Power BI, there are many AI integrations which allows it to automatically suggest charts and graphs for you. But the business context itself is kind of hard to train, just because business context is very unique to each and every business, right? The way that a single business does things, the other business might not do the exact same things. So probably at one point AI will catch up to that, but then again, it's not as if the whole fear of human jobs being replaced is going to go away, or the whole fear of human jobs being replaced is going to happen anytime soon. It's going to take a while. So with regards to language models, the first few jobs that might be in risk would probably be something like content writing or copywriting or anything to do with writing, right? Even software engineering or basic software engineering jobs, like entry-level software engineering jobs, even they are slightly at risk, unfortunately, just because Microsoft, after the explosion of ChatGPT, they started working on it's basically going to be an extension of GitHub's Copilot, which already allows you to GitHub's Copilot is basically an auto-suggestion system when you type code. So what they're trying to work on right now is something that builds full code bases based on just prompts. So if you ask it, like, let's say, build me a website that, I don't know, sells bicycles, right? Their future model will be able to build a whole website from scratch. So it's becoming that smart these days. What if I want to train a model directly in the company's database? Would that be more effective than me trying to figure out the model myself on my own data? It depends on what the database is, right? Or what kind of data you're trying to train it on. So there are different models suited to different purposes, okay? So for example, there are classification models or regression models, different use cases. So it entirely depends on, first of all, if your company's data is rich enough for it to be trained on, like, and if it's suitable enough to be trained on, or even if it's necessary in the first point. So the one issue that is, I don't think, it's a lot of companies, but some companies do that, is that they jump to AI before even understanding what they need AI for, right? So even though AI is very powerful and very good and all that, just because of the hype, I don't think people should be jumping to it, just because you have to understand what you're going to be using AI for first. Otherwise, it's just a waste of time and effort, right? So if your company is already in the data maturity that you're already using predictive analytics, then AI would definitely be the next step. But if the company has not reached the stage of predictive analytics, then probably that would be the first step. And then after that, AI would be the next step. Okay, so at this point, I hope everyone's done downloading the data sets, and I'd like everyone to open up the AdventureWorks data set, okay? So over here is a view of the AdventureWorks data set. And let me just quickly switch my head to the side. Okay, so the AdventureWorks data set. Over here, you can see that there are 5 different sheets. So you have sheet 2, sheet 3, sheet 4, sheet 5, sheet 6. And what you can try to imagine is that each of these sheets are different tables in a database, which is the AdventureWorks database, okay? And that's what this workbook is replicating. So within the first table, I would like everyone's input on this actually. What do you think this table contains? What kind of data or what kind of information does this table contain? You can just type out your answers in the chat. Okay, calendar table, time series, financial, time data. Okay, so the correct answer would be calendar, just because every business has their own fiscal calendar, and they also would want to relate it to the Gregorian calendar or whichever calendar they're following. So this table basically maps that. Okay, so for example, AdventureWorks, the first fiscal month is July, which is denoted by 1 over here, and it translates to basically 7th month of the year, right? So their fiscal year starts in July, which basically denotes as 1, and you need fiscal calendars like this, especially when you have your own fiscal cycle to follow, right? So that's what this table does. It's basically a calendar table that maps their fiscal calendar to their Gregorian calendar. All right. How about this one? With customer key, first name, last name, full name, birth date. What do you think this table contains? Customer master. All right, perfect. Awesome. Yep, that's correct. So as with every business that deals with customer data, it's always a good idea to store customer information, just because you would want to know your customers, right? Of course, there's a matter of data privacy. So you probably would not be able to access customer information directly like this unless you're working with that specific department. But this table over here gives you a understanding of how it's usually structured. Okay. So since this is a retail company that sells bicycles to different users or different customers out there, every time any new customer joins the transaction table, they are assigned a new customer key with all the information associated to that customer key. Okay. Sheet 4, what do you think this is? Product details. Perfect. So since, again, this is a manufacturing plus retail company, they have an inventory of items. And to be able to keep track of those items, you'd also need a list of products that they have, right? And that is what this table is. It's basically listing all the products that is handled by AdventureWorks, plus their details, things like photo, product line, days to manufacture, color, subcategory, categories, standard cost, and other relevant details. Okay. Sheet 5, what do you think this is? Sales details, perfect. Since, again, this is an OLTP database, which is an online transaction processing database, there will be a table that handles every transaction that goes through the company, okay? So every purchase that is being made by customers, it will be recorded as a transaction. So what you can imagine this is that every line of data over here is an invoice, okay? So typically an invoice would contain things like product key, ship date, customer key, promotion key, sales territory, sales order number, and different kinds of information. Sheet 6, what do you think this is? Market segments. All right. Yes, perfect. So since this AdventureWorks or the AdventureWorks company is a multinational company, they would have different sales locations, right? So to be able to accurately track where each figure is coming from, they would also need their location designation that, okay, 50 billion is coming, or 50 million is coming from the North American region, probably 30 million is coming from Europe region, things like that, right? So to be able to clearly understand how each of your regions are performing, you would also need a table that basically segments your market easily, okay? All right, so now you know that you have the calendar table, you have the customers table, product table, this is the sales table, and this is the region table, okay? We're gonna keep this aside, and I'm just gonna go ahead and close it. And I'm going to open up the budget file. Okay, so the budget file itself, could someone tell me what this budget file contains, or what does a budget file do? Any ideas? Any sales by category by time? Okay, so to put it simply, what the budget table is that when you are a exactly. So when you're a manufacturing company, right, you need to do some sort of cost control. A lot of the costs in a business are actually all the costs in a business can either be related to fixed costs or variable costs, right? Fixed costs are something that you have to pay regardless of how many units you produce or you sell. Variable costs are usually related to how much you need to pay per product produced. Okay. And to that end, if you're producing way too many products, but you're not expecting to sell too much, then you're going to have a cash flow problem, which basically means that you're spending too much, you're not selling enough, so you're not getting enough money back. So to that extent, you will need to have a budget table. Okay, so let's say that you're expecting to not sell many products or many bicycles during the winter months. You'd probably not produce too many bicycles at that point, right? Just because the demand is low. So to that end, you would probably put a lower budget on the winter months and put a higher budget in the summer months where you're expecting to sell a lot. Now, traditionally, when companies build, or when people build budget tables, or when financial analysts build budget tables in Excel, you probably see it in a format like this, which is basically easier for the human reader to understand. Okay, wide format, you have your matrix format over here with the months at the top. You have your category, subcategory, product name on the left side, and then you have your grand totals and grand totals over here, subtotals for each category, and so forth. So for a human reader or for someone who's using Excel, this table is pretty intuitive to understand, right? But when it comes to analysis, it does cause issues, which we're gonna take a look at afterwards, okay? All right, so just for the sake of time, I do realize that I took up way too much time explaining this, so I'm gonna move on, okay? So at this point, all right, so are those tables prepared by data engineers or BI analysts usually? So the financial budget analysis, that's prepared by the financial team. It's not prepared by BI or data engineers. The job of BI or data engineers is to be able to funnel this data that is being stored in company into a software that allows you to automatically process this data, okay? And that's the job of BI analysts or data engineers. The numbers themselves, they're created by whoever is responsible for the finance department or the finance analysts. Okay, so at this point, I would like everyone to pull up Power BI. And as soon as you open a Power BI, you should get a prompt on the top of the screen, and you can just click on the top right cross icon, and you can close that prompt. And we'll wait 1 minute for everyone to do so. Okay, so I hope everyone's loaded into Power BI, and let me give you a quick rundown of what we're going to do first, okay? If you remember the analytics process, let me just pull it up over here. Okay, so the first thing we've done is we've already done the requirements analysis, which we know what we need to achieve, which are these 3 questions, okay? We've also gathered the data, which is the data sourcing stage, and now we're going to be working with the ETL stage over here, okay? So what we're going to do is, first of all, connect to the 2 data sources that you've downloaded, okay? Now, remember how I was saying that, like, Power BI allows you to connect to many different data sources out there. What you'll have to do is click on Get Data at the top left, and you'll be able to see many different data sources over here, okay? If you click on More, it will prompt you it'll give you a prompt that shows you all the different kinds of data sources that's available, okay? Now, even myself, I probably know about like 30% of these. The others are all like, different softwares that are also able to handle data, or like they're used for specific purposes, right? So you don't have to worry too much about knowing everything. You only have to know what you need to know, which is basically that, okay, what is the data storage medium that your company is using and how you're going to connect to it, and that's more than enough. So in this case, let's quickly check what format these files are in. So the two files that I've sent you are in the Excel format, which is the XLSX or XLS format. So we're just going to use Excel workbook. So I'm going to quickly click on Excel workbook, click on connect, and it will give me this prompt over here where I can choose which data sets to connect to. Okay, so I'm going to connect to the AdventureWorks database first. Click on AdventureWorks database, click on open. And after a bit, after it connects to that data source, you'll be shown the navigator window. Now, the navigator window is where you'll be selecting the tables or the sheets that you'll be working with from that data source. So in this stage, you're basically selecting that, okay, you have a database or you have data source, what tables do you want to work with, okay? Power BI is pretty smart, okay? So it's able to understand tables and sheets automatically. Whenever you see this little icon over here with the blue top, that is basically Power BI recognizing a table separately. Or if you don't want to work with Power BI's recommendation, let's say that you click on this and you see that this table preview does not have all the things you need, then you can always go directly with all the full sheet itself. But in this case, since AdventureWorks is provided by Microsoft, this is pretty accurate. So what we're going to do is select the 5 tables, the tables being the little icons with the blue top or the blue header. And after I've selected all 5, calendar, customer, product, sales, and territories, I'm going to click on transform data. So once you click on transform data, depending on the speed of your computer, it might take a while, it might not take a while. You will come across this window over here, which is separate from the Power BI desktop window, and it's called the Power Query Editor. Okay. Now, this Power Query Editor is the engine that allows you to handle ETL steps. Okay. Now, for those who are extensively using Excel, you might already be familiar with Power Query Editor because it's also part of Microsoft Excel now. But for those who are not familiar with it, what you can do with it is that you can connect to data sources and you can edit how that data is flowing into the software itself. Okay. So in this case, what we're going to do is basically define that when Power BI is reading the AdventureWorks data, how do you want it to be read, or what kind of transformations do you want it to apply before it's being read into the software? So the first 5 queries that we loaded, again, Power BI, pretty smart. It applies certain transformation steps by itself, okay? So we're not going to touch anything for these 5 queries, but we're going to click on new source again. Click on Excel workbook. My computer's stuck. Oh, there you go. Okay, so once you click on Get Data in Excel Workbook, you can click on Budget. And you'll be shown the Navigator window again, okay? From the Navigator window, you can click on Budget Sheet, press OK. And you'll get to see the pretty much the same view that you saw in the budget file when we opened it up manually using Excel. Now, these 5 tables over here, the customer, calendar, product, sales, and territories, they're in a format that allows you to easily analyze them, which is basically the long format, okay? So you basically have the category and you have all the relevant data below it in rows. But for the budget table, it looks a bit iffy, right? So for example, it has the first few rows that was also contained in the Excel workbook. And if it's in this state, you will not be able to analyze it properly because, first of all, there's nothing as column 6, and column 6 is basically a mix of numbers and text. And it's basically a hassle not even a hassle, you can't analyze it properly, okay? So we're gonna have to clean up the data a bit. So the first thing I'd like everyone to do is understand that, okay, the Power Query Editor is allowing you to clean up the data, okay? And there are certain steps or certain functionalities within Power Query Editor that allows you to do so. The first point of focus that I'd like everyone to have is on the right side over here, which is called the applied steps. So the applied steps is something like a log of the changes that you're doing to that data, Okay, so anytime you make a change or you apply a transformation to the data, it's going to be recorded over here as an applied step. Now, the advantage of using this applied step is that, let's say you did a few changes here and there, right? But maybe you wanted to jump back a few steps and see what you did back there just for reference, or maybe you wanted to edit it just because you realized that the step that you did a few steps back was wrong, or maybe you just don't want that step at all, right? So instead of removing each and every one that you've done before it or after it, you can just click on that and see the preview in that stage. And if you want to remove it, you can always click on the cross icon on the left side, or you can customize it using the clear icon on the right side if the customization options are available. Now, for this budget table, what I'm going to do is I am going to close change type and remove promoted headers. So I'm only left with source and navigation. Okay. Now in this step, what I'm going to try to do is remove these first three rows. Okay. Now the first three rows are basically the metadata or the information section of that page. You don't really need it. It doesn't really provide much value. So we're going to get rid of these three rows over here. On the top ribbon. So if you've been using Excel, Excel is also by Microsoft. Microsoft decided that user experience should pretty much stay the same across their applications. And that's why they have the same ribbon up here, similar to what Excel has. So once you're in the Power Query Editor, you can click on Home, and you'll be able to see a bunch of different options on this side over here. Okay. So the one option that we're going to be using to get rid of those three rows at the top is remove rows right over here. So again, go to Home, remove rows, and click on remove top rows. So what the remove top rows allows you to do is by specifying a number of row that you want to remove, you can remove it from the top. Okay. So in this case, we're going to be removing the top three rows. Just going to write that here. Press OK. And a new step is added on the right side. And once I click back onto navigation, it shows me what it was before removing the top rows. And if I click on remove top rows, it shows me what happened after I applied the head transformation. So you see the three rows at the top that was there, it was gone. It's gone now. In case you need to edit this step, you can always click on the gear icon and specify a different number of rows if you want. But in this case, we just need to remove the first three rows. Okay. Now the next step is to see that right now our column names are just column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, all those, right? We need this first row of data to be our column headers. So what I'm going to do is under Home, in the Transform category, click on Use First Row as Headers. As soon as you click that, an applied step is added, and the first row of data becomes the category column, the column headers itself, and it's as easy as that. So for example, if you're trying to do this in Python, right, you probably have to rename the index and all that. Power BI packages all those functions into a click of a button, and as soon as you do that, it does that step for you for the whole data set. Okay. Now that we have the proper column headers, we're going to have to check what else do we need to get rid of within this data itself. So if you can notice over here, what we have is under category, we have the accessories, and then you have the subtotal. You have the bikes, and then you have the subtotal, you have clothing, and then you have the subtotal, and then you have grand total. Now, if you leave these grand total or subtotal values in here, let's say that you're trying to do a sum of the budget for 2016, right? So first of all, you're going to be adding up all those values of each category plus the subtotals itself, which is basically going to double the actual value, right? So since you don't need these subtotals over here, what you can do is you can specify to remove certain rows based on a condition. Okay, so let's say the subtotal values are 14,000, subtotal bikes is 85,000 or whatever it is, and each of the rows of subtotals have this word total associated with it, right? So you have either the subtotal or you have the grand total. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to filter out category. So if you see this drop down icon on the top right, click on that, go to text filters, does not contain, and type in total. So does not contain total with a capital T, And just to be safe, I'm going to also type in total with a small t. Now, text is always case sensitive in text filters, so you have to remember that if you want to remove both instances of both capital and no capital, then you'd either have to do this where you specify both capital T and smaller t, or you would have to lowercase the whole column and then remove one total and then proper case it and all that, but that's a big hassle. So we're just going to use this method over here. But both ways work, whichever is more convenient to you. So I'm just going to click on OK. And that gets rid of all the total values. So right now, all you're left with are the accessories, bikes, and clothing, and the relevant budget values. In addition to those grand total and subtotal rows, you also had the grand total at the end, which is basically a column. Now, the column itself cannot, it's not filtered out when you filter out category. But since it's a column, what you can just do is remove that column. So the way that you can remove a column, either select it, click delete on your keyboard, you'll get rid of that. Or conversely, right click on the grand total, click on remove over here, or go over here at the top under manage columns, remove columns, and it's going to get rid of that column. So many different ways of doing the same thing, whichever is easier to you. I end up usually using the keyboard because one hand on mouse, one hand on keyboard is usually more intuitive to me, but whatever suits you better. Okay, now that you have removed the grand total, we need these values. So for example, okay, right now what we're looking at is that category for January, accessories was 1,131, for February 2,635, and so forth. But let's say you're trying to do a comparison for each month, right? If you have different columns like this, then for each column you'll need an axis. So for example, let me draw it up over here. So for example, let's say you're trying to do a time series comparison, right? You want the time to be in the x-axis, you want the values to be in the y-axis. So let's say this is budget or dollars, and this is time, okay? Now, if you have a whole column, right? So how does a graph work? The axis label itself, or the axis name itself, is the column header. And the values or the tick marks on the axis are these values over here, right? So if you have it in this format, what you're going to have are 12 different charts, each for 1 month. And that doesn't really help you do some sort of comparison, right? So the way that you could deal with that is by putting all the values of the months in one column and all the relevant budget values of each month in another column right beside it. And to that end, what you'll have to do is pivot it. So right now, what you can imagine is that the data is stored in a wide format. Okay, it's in a long format, or sorry, it's in a wide format. The term pivoting in physics, it's basically rotation around this fixed point. Okay, if you rotate a fixed bar around a point, then that's called pivoting. In data analytics or even in data transformation, pivoting means exactly the same. So let's say I'm going to select 2016 January. While this is selected, I'm going to scroll all the way to the right. Hold down Shift on your keyboard. So basically multi-selecting, hold down Shift, click on 2016, December. That way I'm selecting from January 2016 to December 2016. Okay. Now, once I've selected these, make sure that you're basically clicking on January 2016, scroll to the right, hold down Shift, click on December 2016. And let's say you want to pivot it all. What you can do is right click while everything is selected and click on unpivot columns over here. The other option for you to do that would be from transform. And you can click on unpivot columns over here at the top under transform ribbon. So I'm going to do that. And what happens is that every month value is under one column, and every relevant value of that budget table is under the next column. Okay. What you can see is that each accessory has also multiplied, right? So because you're shifting only one part of the data long, and the other part is still the same, the data multiplies on the left side, which is basically not being unpivoted. It's only one section of the chart that's being pivoted, right? So that's why you have duplication of data. It's not duplication per se, it's basically expansion of the data, okay? And that's totally fine, as long as each row of data makes sense. So for example, for accessories in 2016, the budget value was 1,131. Accessories in July was 2218, and so forth, okay? At this point, what you can do is you can compare data between different months, right? Because you can have the month value as the x-axis, you can have the sum value as the budget value as the y-axis. Okay, I'm gonna take a pause over here, and if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat. Is there a column limit or row limit for the unpivot column function? Well, rows are not like, I think you mean column limit. There is, actually, I'm not too sure about that, but I don't think there should be a column limit for unpivot columns, because what if you needed to unpivot 100 columns, right? I don't think there should be one. If there is one, then that's a limitation, but technically there shouldn't be any. I'm gonna have to take a look at that as well, but I don't think there should be any. So you could always take a look at the Microsoft documentation for that. As far as I understand, there shouldn't be any. This is somewhat like transpose. So we have a question like, is this like transpose? It is somewhat like transpose. For example, when you have Excel, you have data in a linear or horizontal format. When you transpose it, it becomes a vertical format or vertical to horizontal. It's something like that. But in this case, there is duplication or expansion of the related data. That's why it's called pivoting. If you try to transpose data onto existing columns, then it will throw an error. But if you pivot it, it'll work. Okay, if no more questions, I'll move on. So at this point, your data transformation is properly done. What you're gonna have to do now is rename this, okay? So all your month values are stored up here, so might as well rename this to month. So the way that you rename it is you can right click on it, click on rename over here, or an easier way is to just double click it. So as soon as you double click it, you can rename it, and I'm just gonna name it month. I'm gonna do the same thing for value. Instead of value, I'm gonna say it's budget amount. And just like that, I've renamed two columns. What was the problem with having white columns? As I was saying, the white, if you have it in the white column, right, you can still work with the data, but then you cannot compare it to each other, right? You'll have multiple charts. So instead of having one chart with month values divided up into tick markers, you'll have 12 different charts because each column forms one axis label. So whenever you want to do comparison, you need the data to be in a long format so that you're able to easily plot charts and graphs. What did you rename as budget amount? So whatever was value before this, so I changed the value to budget amount and attribute to month. So whichever column has your month values, rename that to month. Whichever column has your budget values, rename that to budget amount. Okay, how do you have the bars as valid and or empty? That's actually a very good question. So data integrity or data completeness is a very important aspect. Okay, if you're working with data that is not complete, then you might end up analyzing the wrong thing, right? So for example, you're comparing 12 months of sales data versus 12 months of budget data, but for some reason, some rows of data is missing from your budget table, right? If you did not check that, then you might end up with a wrong interpretation, thinking that your budget is actually lesser than what it actually is. So you always have to make sure that you do data completeness check, okay? So the way that you get this over here is by clicking on view, click on column quality. If it's not selected, then you get these values over here. If you want column distribution, then you click on that. Distribution, it's basically to understand how the data is separated out. It's not really important for this case, but sometimes you have to use that. But this part over here, the validity or the data completeness, that is very important. So you have to make sure that your data is complete. If it's not complete, there are ways to deal with that as well. So you either remove the data that's missing, or you impute it, or you use some other method to fill that missing data up. Okay. Now that we have renamed these, what I'm going to do is I am going to change the data type of budget amount. Actually, budget amount is correct. I'm going to change the data type of month to date. Right now, it's showing ABC on the left side, which basically means that it's in the text format. Because we're going to be using this column as a date value, we're going to have to designate it as a date data type. So what I'm going to do is click on month, or the little ABC icon on the top left side, and it'll show me a bunch of data values that I can change it to, or data types I can change it to. I'm going to click on date. Make sure to click on date and not date time. So you'll need it in the date format. And if you don't want to use that, you can always go to home. And on the top ribbon, you'll be able to see data type over here. And you can change that there as well. Okay. What is error here for columns? So for example, if you try to, if you try to convert a specific, so for example, over here you have product name, right? You have a mixture of numbers and text. Let's say I try converting this to decimal number. You can't really convert it, right? So that's basically your like 100% error. This one is not refreshing. Sometimes this does not update, but technically, like, all these are errors, right? So once you refresh this view, it will show you that. Let me see if that works. Okay, so technically what's supposed to happen is that if you have erroneous values or values that does not match the data type, then it will show up over here as an error, okay? But if you don't have that, then it will not show as an error. Okay, if we make changes, will it be updated in the data set, or only changes will work and won't affect the original set? That is a good question as well. So what all these visualization softwares do is it reads an image of the actual data. It does not alter the actual data. It just reads off of that data source. And as it's being read, you're applying all these different transformation steps as it's being imported or being loaded into the Power BI software. And that's where the changes happen. So the original data set stays the same as it is, but as the data is being loaded into Power BI, it's being changed with these transformation steps. So imagine like a filter that you can customize, and that filter is changing how the data looks on the other side. Okay, so again, I'm just going to change month to date. And that's pretty much it for the ETL steps. So I hope this gives you a good understanding of what kind of things you can do with ETL. And by the way, this is just very introductory. You can do many different sorts of things, right? No matter how dirty your data is, Power Query Editor is very powerful. Okay, so all you have to do is just experiment with it, play around with it, take a look at a few resources online. You'll be able to find what you need to do. Okay, now that we have finished all our ETL steps, I'm going to click on Close and Apply on the top left. And what it'll do is all those changes that I've made, or all those transformation steps that I've taken, it will apply that to the data as it's being loaded in. Okay, so as I said, imagine it like a filter. As I'm pouring the data into the cup, it's being filtered in a specific way, and the data that comes out of the other side of the filter will appear as how I have intended it to be. Okay, so once you see that your data has been loaded, you can click on this model view on the left side of the Power BI desktop window. Okay, by the way, just quick heads up, we will definitely go over time. I expected to finish by 8:30, but we're just halfway there. So I do apologize in advance. But if you're able to keep up and if you're still working along, then I definitely recommend sticking with us, okay? All right, so data modeling. Now, data modeling is the step which allows you to define how each table is connected to each other, right? Again, Power BI is trying to help us, and that's why it builds a data model automatically. Okay, but most of the times it does not have the context associated with it. That's why it's not able to accurately map connections. So what we're going to do is how to get to the data modeling screen. It's just on the left side. So over here, you have 3 buttons. There's report view, there's data view, there's model view. So you just have to click on model view. So once you come to the modeling window, what I'd like you to do is click on manage relationships at the top and get rid of the relationships that Power BI has automatically detected. Okay, so what I'm going to do is Control A on your keyboard and delete all relationships so that you're starting up from scratch. Okay, now the data modeling aspect itself is a whole domain, right? There are different ways you can do data modeling. There are different considerations you have to do while data modeling. There's normalization, there's cardinalities and all those things, but that's a whole other domain that you'll have to sign up for the bootcamp for, actually. So we'll leave that aside for now. What we're going to briefly touch upon is how do you even build the connections, right? So since we need to connect each of these tables to each other, what we're going to follow is the fact and dimension modeling. Okay, so to put it simply, what you can imagine is that first of all you have specific facts. Okay, facts are irrefutable. These are something that happened, and these are events that are the most granular in their existence. Okay, so it's basically the lowest level of detail that you can expect. Building on those facts are dimensions. So imagine you have a fact that, okay, a transaction has happened, a sale has happened. Each of those sales has some attributes associated with it, right? So for example, you have customer, you have product, you have region, and all these different things in these facts. Each of these attributes can be expanded with the dimensions, okay? So for example, in a specific sales transaction, you have the customer key, but what if you needed more information about the customer, right? That's where the dimensions come in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the fact tables, which are basically my sales table and my budget table on the bottom. Again, you don't have to necessarily keep it at the bottom. You can literally leave them anywhere, but just for the sake of simplicity and understanding, I'm just going to organize it in an easy way. Okay, so I'm going to put sales and budget on the bottom, calendar, product, customer, territories at the top. Okay. Zoom in a bit. Okay. Now you have calendar, product, customer, territories at the top, but sales and budget at the bottom with no connections in between. Okay. What I'm going to start doing now is start connecting sales to different tables out there. Okay. So the way that you understand how to even relate each table is by understanding if there is any common field between it. Okay, if there's a specific field in a table that allows you to connect to another table which expands on that field, then you can. If you can't, then you'll have to either change the data or transform the data in a way that allows you to do so, or find a different way of doing it. Okay, in this case, calendar and sales. What is the one field that is common? It would be the sales date itself, right? So if you remember, the calendar table had something called date in it, and sales had order date in it, right? So what I'm going to do is to connect these two tables, all you'll have to do is drag order date from sales, drop it on calendar and date. Okay. Once you do that, you'll see that there's a line that flows from calendar table to sales table with a icon that is pointing towards the right. Okay, now this icon is usually not touched upon in the basics, but let me just give you a quick understanding of what it is. If it's in a single way, right, or if it's a single direction, then you can filter sales by calendar, but you cannot filter calendar by sales. If you wanted to filter both ways, change this to both. If you wanted to filter a single way, then you change this to single. Since you're just learning, I would always recommend changing it to both, but for security purposes, sometimes it's better if it's single, because in a company, you don't want end users to be able to access all the information, right? So maybe you just want them to understand only about sales based on products, but you don't want them to know everything about products. But since you're just learning, switch everything to both. And as you work with it more, you'll be able to understand it better. Okay, where do you drop order date? Order date, I have dropped it on date on calendar, and that's how I'm relating both of it. The reason why I'm not using ship date is because you don't want to know the sales by its shipment date, right? What if the sales occurred, but the shipment was never sent, right? What if it's still under processing? So shipment date would not be a proper column to base the analysis off of. It would be the order creation date itself. So, and then again, like you'd also have to understand what is the primary key for that table, like what is the unique identifier? Actually, no, that's wrong. What is the unique field in that table that allows it to map onto the other? Okay, so for example, in this one, every sales would have an order date associated with it, but probably not a shipment date. Maybe it's not been shipped out. So that's what I'm going to relate sales order date onto calendar date. Same way, I'm going to relate product and sales. I'm going to relate product key from sales to product key in product. So all I'm doing is dragging sales from product key from sales, dropping it on product key from product. Would you have an order ID? There could be many sales for the same date. That is very true. So what we're trying to find out over here is we're not trying to use the calendar date to find out individual sales, but rather we're trying to use the calendar table to understand how many sales have occurred within a single date. Right. So if you were trying to just use order ID, then you would probably be relating order ID to some extension out there, right? So for example, if you had another table that said order shipment table, right? In that case, you'd be using order ID from sales to order ID to shipment table. Okay. I hope that made sense. How did you get the edit relationship box? Edit relationship box, you just have to click on manage relationships up here, and you'll be able to edit them from here. Or is that what you're talking about? Or are you talking about this over here? If this is what you're talking about, all you'll have to do is double click on the line between two tables, and it will give you that edit relationship. Over here, you can specify, like, okay, from sales table, I'm going from order date to calendar date. And you can specify what cardinality is, like if it's a one-to-one relationship, one-to-many, many-to-many, and what the cross-filter direction should be. Okay, I'm going to speed up a bit over here. So sales to customer, I am going to relate it on customer key. So customer key to customer key over here. And territories, I am going to relate sales territory key to sales territory key. I did not do that right. Okay, so from sales, it's going to be sales territory key to sales territory key. Okay. Just gonna double check. Yeah, sales territory, sales territory key. Okay, now I've connected sales table with these four tables. All right, and what this has formed is that sales is the fact table, and each of these four tables are the dimensions that expands on each fact from the sales table. Okay, the same way I'm going to do it with the budget table as well. First of all, I have to understand that, okay, what can I even connect the budget table to, just because it does not contain customer information, it does not contain territory information, right? So the two things that I can connect it to are the month to the date table, or the date column in the calendar table. So drag month from budget to date under calendar, and product key from budget to product key under product. And that way your data modeling is done. So what I've done now is I've connected sales to the dimensions, connected budget to the dimensions. So for every product, you can find out its sales, you can find out its budget. For every customer, you can only find out their sales. For every calendar date, you can find out the sales and budget and so forth. Okay. Now, this whole data modeling step, it might not make much sense now if you're not worked with it, but as you work with different projects, as you work with different analytics projects out there, you will get a better understanding of what data modeling is all about, okay? Product key was dropped under which one in product table. So I took product key from budget and I dropped it on product key under product. So you might have to scroll up or down a bit to find it, but it's there. Okay, now that the data modeling step is done, we're going to move on to the, we're going to move on to the visualization step. So as I was saying, remember how I said the ETL step takes quite a bit? This is exactly what I mean. ETL is complicated, right? It depends on how messy your data is. We're lucky in a way that our data right now is clean, so you don't have to do much about it. But when you're working with real data, it's a nightmare, right? It is very fun once you figure it out, but when you first look at it, then you'd be scratching your head, right? So it's always a fun process to figure that part out. Okay, now that the data modeling is done, we're going to move into the report view. So again, on the left side, all you'll have to do is click on the report view and you'll come into the canvas that you're going to be building your visuals on. Okay. Okay, I hope everyone's caught up so far. Awesome, cool. All right, so we'll start off with basic visualizations first, okay? So the first thing I would like everyone to take a look at is, let's see. All right, so the first thing that we want to put up is a simple card, okay? On the right side over here, you should have a visualization pane, which allows you to see what typical visualizations Power BI offers. But in addition to that, you can also click on Get More Visuals, and this is what I was talking about. You can access a whole marketplace that allows you to do many different kinds of visuals. Some of them you might already know, some of them might look like futuristic stuff, like even I have no idea what some of them does. So it's always fun to explore the different charts that are out there. And it's also very, there are a lot of different cool charts out there. So if you're into design, art, and all that, this is definitely a great place to explore. But we'll keep it simple. The first thing we're going to do is put up a card. So you should see this little icon over here that says 1, 2, 3. That's a card. And what a card does is it displays a single value and an aggregated. It basically displays an aggregated value. Okay. What I want to display in this card is the sum of the sales. Okay. So what I'm going to do is from the right side of the data pane, I'm going to drag sales amount right over here. Just drop it on the visual. And that is going to calculate the sum of all the sales values that is available in the data set itself. Okay. This is a great way to quickly show to give a quick glimpse into the actual figures of the value of the data itself. Okay. And at this point, I want to talk a bit about the DAX functions. Okay. Now, there's something called measures inside Power BI. Okay. What measures is basically an aggregation of data that exists in a granular format, right? So for example, you have the sales sum table or the sales amount table, many granular rows and data, right? When I dragged sales amount onto here, it automatically calculated a sum on the right side, okay? And what this is referred to as is called implicit measure, okay? Implicit measure is something that is automatically calculated by Power BI. Now, there's nothing wrong with using implicit measure, but let's say that you are trying to use more advanced measures, right? In that case, you would have to create your own calculation, okay? And that's where DAX measures come in. And DAX measures is probably one of the reasons why, it is definitely one of the reasons actually why Power BI is also so powerful, because you can pretty much define any sort of calculation that you want inside it, okay? And the way that you do that is by clicking on New Measure over here. So let's say I am going to click on sales just to make sure that this table is selected. I'm going to click on New Measure. And it'll form a little calculator icon on the right side, and it'll tell you measure over here. So while this is selected, you should see a formula bar similar to what Excel has, okay? Over here, I can specify that, okay, I want a measure that has the sum of all sales. So sales, supposed to auto recommend. Let's test what's wrong with this. Oh, there you go. So if it doesn't work, just click on enter, try to edit it again, and you should get this over here. Okay. So as you type it out, it'll offer you recommendations of what you can do as sum on. And what I'm going to do is do a sum on all sales amount. Okay. So what I'm basically doing is I'm creating a measure that sums up all the sales amount. Okay. Okay. So just for reference, on this side, we have the implicitly created value, which is sales amount. I just dragged and dropped it here. I'm going to create a new card. Actually, I'm just going to use this, copy paste. I'm going to remove this. And instead of using sales amount, I'm going to use sales, the measure that I just created. Okay. You get exactly the same value. Okay. Now you may ask, like, why even use this? So one of the clear advantages of using measures is that sometimes you need to export this data to Excel to further analyze it. Okay. And if you use implicit measures, the data that the aggregation data that is being created by the implicit measure will not flow into Excel. But if you create an explicit measure, which is what I just created using a DAX measure or DAX function, it will flow over to Excel. Okay. That one is not really used, like, to a certain degree, but in case you needed to do that, then you would basically have to use DAX function. The other functionality of DAX function is that now that I have something called sales, which is basically an aggregation of all the sales amount, I can base other measures off of this value. Okay. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go to the budget table, create a new measure. And I'm going to say this is the budget and sum of all the budget. So budget amount. So again, I created two measures. One is sales, which is the sales sum amount, sum of sales amount. And another measure I created on the budget table, which is the sum of budget amount. Okay. So what I'm going to do is do this here. I'm going to retain the one that I created using the measure. I'm going to get rid of this. Put in budget over here, 17 million. You can always decrease the size a bit if you want, just to make it a bit more. You know what? Paste. So the layout, again, you can do it as you like. I do like mine pretty uniform, so I'm just going to copy the same size, and I'm just going to replace the value itself. I'm going to copy paste it again, just so that I have the same size. Put it over here. Paste, put it over here. Now it does not match up, so you'll have to forgive my OCD. And there is an easier way to do it. You can use the format and align, but we're going to skip that for now. So I'm just going to move this, and put back in sales here. Okay, now we have budget and sales. All right. Right now it's being displayed as a general number. Okay, but sales and budget are basically monetary values. So if you want to display them in monetary values, what you can do is click on the data field itself, or the measure itself that you're trying to display it as a currency field. Go to measure tools if it's not already been selected, and just click on this currency icon or the dollar sign. It's going to convert the budget value to this. Okay, so it's showing me 16.87 something. The size needs to be a bit bigger. Okay, so 16.8. I'm going to convert sales as well to dollars. You can always reduce the the decimal places using the same pane. So I'm going to just say one decimal point. 1. Okay. So basically, I've limited it to 1 decimal point, and I've converted them into the currency data type. Now that we have 2 different measures over here, we can create more measures based on that. Okay. So one of the main measures that you would be working with when you're working with sales and budget is the variance. Now, the variance, what it does is it gives you an indication of whether you've gone over budget, or you've even attained the sales level of the budget prescribed, or you've gone under it. Okay. And the simple measure calculation for that is sales minus budget. Okay. So I'm going to click on new measure. And create something called variance is equal to sales minus budget. And that what that gives me is the variance itself. Okay, so which is basically over the actual value and under the actual value from what it was supposed to be. I'm going to convert variance into dollar signs as well, since it's a monetary value. I'm going to convert this to 1 decimal point. And we're going to have variance percentage over here, which is basically the budget divided by, let me take a quick look at it without the formula. It's variance divided by budget. So again, same thing over here. I'm going to click on new measure. I'm going to name it variance percentage equal to divide variance on my budget. And what that does is it gives me a percentage value of the variance itself. Okay, so it's 0.74%. So variance by budget. Okay, that's correct. All right. Now, the variance, since it's a percentage, I'm also going to convert it to a percentage option. And it shows me like 73%. We'll deal with that later. Now you have your top part of the dashboard. Okay. We're going to need a few more visuals to be able to understand it better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start creating a bunch of charts and graphs. Okay. So the first chart that I'm going to create is a clustered bar chart. Clustered bar chart is basically the grouping is done by the category that you're assigning it in the y-axis, and the x-axis is the actual value itself, because this is horizontal one. Okay. So for the clustered bar chart, what I'm going to drag is for the x-axis, I want it to be the value of the sales itself and the budget. So I'm going to drag the sales measure that I created earlier, put it on the x-axis, drag out budget, put it on the x-axis as well. And for the y-axis, I am going to put the category. Okay. So what category does right now is it's showing me the sales and budget by each category down here. Okay. One of the other beautiful things about Power BI is that you can build hierarchies very easily. Okay. As you may know, subcategories, there were different subcategories under each category. Like, for example, under accessories, you had different subcategories. You can always drag that and drop it here. And that will form your subcategories underneath it. So let's say I want to see how bikes performed. I can right click this, drill down, and it will expand only to show me the bike category. And everything else over here has also updated itself. So this basically forms the big cornerstone of all self-service analytics, right? If you just click on one, you're able to see the context associated with that specific field. So click up over here, just click outside the box just to make sure everything's reset. And I'm going to copy and paste this, create a similar one. Just going to put this here. Okay, now that we have sales and budget by category, let's do variance by category instead of sales and budget. Okay, so I'm just going to remove sales and budget from the x-axis. I'll leave category and subcategory in the y-axis, put in variance in the x-axis, and that's what you get. Okay, so you have positive variance and negative variance for each field. And if you click on it, drill down, then you'll be able to see how much variance each of them has cost. Okay, In addition to that, I'm also going to add in a line chart that shows me the budget and sales value by year. Okay. So since we are only considering a single year, what we're going to do is first of all limit the whole visual to a single year. Okay. So what I'm going to do is pull up year from calendar. So under the calendar field, drag in year from here to filters on this page. And that will allow you to choose a specific year to filter on. So in this case, I'm going to only be working with 2016. And that's going to show me only 2016 values. Let's expand this a bit. And there you go. Okay, now you can see each of them. So over here, what I'm going to drag in this line chart value over here, what I'm going to drag in is it was budget and sales. So it's right here. So you have budget under the y-axis, and you have sales under the y-axis as well. And for the x-axis would be your months. So you can just drag month and drop it on the x-axis. Okay. Now you might notice one thing in Power BI is that the month values, they're not automatically sorted. Okay, just because Power BI by itself does not recognize the month name by itself. So you will have to designate what that column specifically is being sorted on. Okay. And there's an easy way to do that. For example, I want to sort month by the month num, right? So from 1 to 12, it should go in ascending order. So I'm going to select on month, go to column tools, under sort, click on sort by column, and click on month num. So that way you can specify how you want a specific column to be sorted by. So if you have a numerical field that does that, you can always choose that as your sorting method. And since it's going descending, I'm going to change it to ascending. So this little three little ellipses over here, sort axis, month, and descending. So right now you have a line chart over here on the left side that shows you the budget and sales per month. Okay. Next up, you have the variance by month. Okay. So I'm just going to copy paste. So once you have an existing visual, right, what you can do is you can click on the chart that you want it to be, and it will automatically convert to that. So in this case, I want it to be a vertical stacked column chart, right, or maybe a clustered column chart. It's showing me sales and budget, but instead of showing me sales and budget, I want it to show me variance. And as simple as that, I have month by variance. So now I'm able to tell which month has more variance than the other. Finally, I'm going to include two tables on the right side over here. And what I'm going to do over here is I am going to search up customer name. So customer name, first name, and sales. For copy paste, what I did is I used Control-C and Control-V. If you don't have Control-C or Control-V, you can click on this, right click, copy, copy visual, and paste using this top left icon. Okay. Now, first name, last name, there is a way to add them up, which is basically using calculator columns or DAX measures, but I will skip that for the sake of time. I'm just going to drag in last name over here. So you have first name, last name, and you have sales. So the sales value is right here. Okay. Now, this is a table which gives you the first name, last name, and sales value. What if you wanted to find out the top 10 sales? Okay. What you could do is once you clicked on this visual, you can expand the filter on the right side for sales. And you can change it to advanced if I'm not wrong. Actually, 1 second. Okay, sorry. So the filtering itself has to be done on the first name or the last name. Okay, so let's say I'm going to select the last name. I'm going to change it to top N. And I'm going to specify, show me top 10 of the last names by the sales itself. Okay, So since I want to show only the top 10 values of sales, I'm going to put a filter on the last name and show me the top 10 sales. And just as easy as that, it's showing the top 10 sales over here. And but then again, like, there's I think there's a data issue over here because it's supposed to be shown for both of them. Yeah, there's a data value issue over here. What you'd have to do is basically add them up and then do the top 10 by sales filtering, and that way you'll only get the top 10 over here. Okay. For the sake of time, unfortunately, I will not be able to fix this, but I suggest taking a look at this, trying to figure out how to do the top 10. Okay. What we can do the top 10 for easily is the product itself. So I'm just going to copy and paste this over here again, get rid of first name, last name, put in product name, and get rid of this filter over here while this visual is selected. Choose product name, top N, top 10 by sales, apply filter. Right, okay. So that's where the these things come in. So you have to make sure that all of them are in the both direction. So I'm going to quickly do that. So what I'm going to recommend you to do is go to your data modeling step and make sure the cross filter security is set to both directions. If not, then it's not going to be able to pull the data properly. So product is the one that we need. Yeah, I might have messed something up there, but generally what you should be able to do is, oh yeah, it is working now. Okay, so right now it seems to be working, but the customer table is still broken, so that might be a data modeling issue that I'll have to take a look at again. But technically what you should be able to do is once you specify top N over here, it will show you the top 10 values by sales for each product, okay? And you can do the same with product name as well. And finally, I'm going to add in a small text box in the top right and just say it's Adventure Works. So Adventure Works is dashboard. Select the whole thing, increase it by size, so 24, resize it as necessary, and that's about it. Okay. One last thing I did want to show everyone is the conditional formatting. So for example, over here, you have different values of the variance. What if you wanted to show the gradient, the color, the value by gradient? Okay. One of the things you could do is just click on the visual itself, go to data labels, actually not data labels, it should be under columns. Click on the FX, and that will allow you to specify the gradient. Okay, so click on gradient, which field should we base this on? Base it on the variance. Lowest value should be red. Highest value should be green, or actually the opposite way around. Highest value should be red. That's okay. And what you get is over here, like, the lower the value is, the more green it is, the higher the value is, the more red it is. Okay. Now this logic is not correct actually, because normally you shouldn't be able to, you shouldn't be showing variance like that, because any sort of variance is wrong, either be it positive or negative. Okay. So this is just just a way to show you how to do conditional formatting, but the color choice itself should reflect what you're trying to convey to the user itself. Okay, so for example, if you're trying to do profit and loss, probably you would use green or red, or sometimes people don't prefer the color red because it shows a sign of danger. So you can choose whatever color you want. But if you wanted to implement conditional formatting, you could also do so with Power BI. Okay. Now, this dashboard is in a very incomplete state for the sake of time. Once you do finish it, it looks something like this. It's much more cleaner and all that. So I would recommend you to take the time to explore the different visual formatting options that are available in Power BI and try to build up the visual as you see fit. Okay. All right. So that is pretty much the end of the workshop itself. So I would just like to quickly talk about the business intelligence bootcamp that we're highlighting over here. So whatever you've learned so far is just a glimpse of what you'll be starting off the bootcamp with, okay? And at WeCloudData, we want to ensure that the aspirations and skills that you come to us with are polished, motivated, and enabled, with the outcome that you are able to come out of the 3-month bootcamp with job-ready skills and also confidence, and out of the mentorship program with an expressive personality and a guarantee of total support until you land your dream job. We will be training you on 5 data tools, which is basically Excel, Power BI, SQL, Python, and Tableau, and 8 industrial-grade projects. So the project that we just worked on is actually part of the pre-bootcamp that we have for our students, which is basically meant to get students started on this path. And from that point onwards, it just gets more complicated and more complex, right? And the main idea is that it's not a skill-based training, but it's a role-based training. So all the things that you'll need to know to land that data job or the data analytics job, we would be providing you during the bootcamp itself. So using those 8 industry projects as well as the 5 data tools, you'll be building the context to be able to address business problems and the scope that you will need to that will ensure you will remember under what circumstances to use which tools and when to use them and to achieve what outcomes. So currently we have 2 cohorts lined up. We have a cohort starting on the April 3rd until June 22nd, which is going to be based off the Eastern time zone. That is from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. every day from Monday to Friday. We will usually have classes only for 4 days per week, and the 1 day is a Ask Me Anything session where you can join the TA session. You can talk to the TAs if you need any help or if you're being stuck with any of the problems that you're going through during the bootcamp. And after you're done with the coursework, after you've graduated from the bootcamp, you'll immediately be sitting for a small mentorship test. Now, the mentorship test is basically designed for you to test that you have the hard skills in place before you move on to the soft skills practice with the mentorship program. And once you move on to the mentorship program, depending on your career positioning or your career strategy or which industry you'd like to enter, you can actually work with multiple let me just quickly show you the list. You can work with multiple mentors from the industry, okay? And these are all basically professionals and senior leaders in the data industry, working in different fields, different industries. And for that, you can always take a look at the WeCareer mentor list over here. Let's say you want to work with RBC or NASDAQ or Microsoft or Canadian Tire, whichever company you'd want to enter, you can choose that mentor to work with so that they'll be the ones who will help guide you with your resume preparation, with your interviewing scripts, basically the whole package of you getting ready for that interview and to pass that interview with flying colors, okay? Now, the mentorship and bootcamp package is packaged into one, so I would definitely recommend checking in with our sales and the program advisors so that they are able to provide more options for you and to also recommend you what you should be doing or what you could be doing depending on your position right now, and we can always take it from there, okay? Now, the other part is that we have opted for a 7 to 10 p.m. class just because we understand that people have different things going on in life. Some people prefer the classes to be at night because of full-time jobs. So right now we have the part-time option that is from 7 to 10 p.m. And probably later down the line of the year, we're also planning to launch a full-time bootcamp, but that will take some time to be launched. Okay, so after that, again, as I was saying, you will be working with the mentors, and the mentorship qualification test will get you ready for that platform. And it is currently free of cost as long as you are a part of the Applied Business Intelligence program. And with that, we come to an end. I do apologize for going 30 minutes over time, but I really want to thank everyone for sticking with us until the end. I do hope that you found this session insightful. Again, as much as I wanted to cover everything, unfortunately, time does not allow us, and I tend to get stuck in rabbit holes. So please do keep exploring Power BI. Power BI is definitely an amazing software to explore with. And especially in the industry these days, data is digital oil. So as long as you're able to work with data, regardless of which position you are in or which position you want to enter, you definitely have leverage over any other candidate out there, just because you're able to disseminate all this business information very easily and even explain the whole business better than the owners of the business itself. So what reason would they have of not hiring you, right? So as long as you have the data literacy to be able to position yourself as the brains of the business, you can definitely and easily climb your way up to manager or executive level very easily. Okay. As for the bootcamp costs, there are different options available. There are different packages available. Some are with the real client projects that you can choose to work with real clients out there who come to us with projects, and we assign students to work with them, or you can choose just the bootcamp and the mentorship package. So for that, I would definitely recommend going into our website. All you have to do is go to WeCloudData.com. Under the courses page, search up Business Intelligence Bootcamp. Fill in the form over there, and the program advisors will reach out to you very quickly. Okay. And from that point onwards, you'll basically be able to discuss the different options that are available with them. In case you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, feel free to do so. I've left my LinkedIn ID over there. So all you have to do is search my name, Adnan Rahman, and you'll be able to find me there. And if you have any questions regarding the bootcamp or the stuff that we've worked on today, I'd be happy to talk to you. Just send me a message. I do kind of slack on LinkedIn. I don't really get to check the messages as much as I'd like to, but I will definitely get back to you as soon as I can. And as usual, it was a definite pleasure to be able to work with everyone today. And I very much look forward to the next session with everyone. And if you have any questions, feel free to message me at any time, and I'd be happy to talk to you. So I will stay behind for the next 10 minutes in case anyone has any questions. If you don't, I wish everyone a great weekend, a great evening ahead, and I look forward to the next session with everyone, and I hope everyone stays safe. So thank you very much.